Okay, are we there? All right, so on page 398, we're continuing this week with reading on the Buddhist prophecy, which is mentioned on page 6 of this lecture, which we will start as soon as we're done reading this particular Gosho. And again, as I already read the background to you last week, I already told you Shramana means seeker of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and start reading. All right? This is about Kosen Rufu, this Gosho. All right? The 7th volume, everybody's with me on page 398 of volume 1. Next Gosho after this one. Next one after that, right?
Yeah, this one.
On the Buddhist prophecy. Okay, you got it?
Yeah.
You ready? I'm going. The 7th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, after I have passed into extinction in the last 500-year period, you must spread it, the Lotus Sutra, abroad, widely throughout Jampadvipa, and never allow it to be cut off. On the one hand, it is deplorable to me that more than 2,200 years have already passed since the Buddha's demise. What evil karma prevented me from being born in his lifetime? Why could not I have seen the 4 ranks of sages in the former day of the law, or Tentai and Dingyo in the middle day of the law? On the other hand, I rejoice at whatever good fortune enabled me to be born in the last 500-year period and to read these true words of the sutra. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Do you understand what he was alluding to? He said he's explaining to you without explaining to you what is the better fortune, to have been born in Shakyamuni's time or to be born in the latter day. Okay? Even if I had been born in the Buddha's lifetime, it would have served no purpose. For those who embraced the 4 flavors of teachings had not yet heard of the Lotus Sutra. Again, my being born in either the former or the middle day of the law would have been meaningless, for neither the scholars of the 3 schools of the south or the 7 schools of the north in China, nor those of the flower garland, true word, or any other schools believed in the Lotus Sutra. The great teacher Tentai states, in the last 500-year period, the mystic law will spread and benefit humankind far into the future. Does this not describe the time of wide propagation? The great teacher Dingyo says, the former and middle days are almost over and the latter day is near at hand. These words reveal how much he longed for the beginning of the latter day of the law. If we consider the rewards of living in the different ages, it is clear that mine surpasses those of Nagarjuna and of Vasubandhu and excel those of Tiantai and Dingyo. Question. You are not the only person living in this last 500-year period. Why are you in particular so overjoyed to be living now? Answer. The 4th volume of the Lotus Sutra reads, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? The great teacher Tentai states, it will be much worse in the future because the principles of the Lotus Sutra are so hard to teach. The great teacher Myolo explains, the purpose of the phrase, the principles are so hard to teach, is to let us know how hard it is to enable people to understand these principles. So he's making that clear.
Yeah.
Right? This is not an easy task. Don't expect people to be able to understand just because you're smart or you're a capable speaker. This is always a reflection of their karma.
Yes.
Okay? Hearing the name is the words of the truth. That door is actually opened by the person hearing the name and the words of the truth. Do you understand? Okay. The purpose of the phrase, the principles are so hard to teach, is to let us know how hard it is to enable people to understand these principles. The Dharma teacher Chi Tu states, it is said that good medicine tastes bitter. This sutra, which is like good medicine, dispels attachments to the 5 vehicles and establishes the ultimate principle. You understand? This sutra, which is like good medicine, it changes poison into medicine, right? Dispels attachments to the provisional teachings, okay? To that 5 vehicles and establishes the ultimate principle of the one vehicle, right? Which in the latter day has been now qualified as the Buddhism of the sowing and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It reproaches those in the ranks of ordinary beings and censures those in the ranks of sagehood, denies provisional Mahayana and refutes Hinayana. Do you understand all that? Do you understand? It reproaches those in the ranks of ordinary beings and censures those in the ranks of sagehood, denies provisional Mahayana, and refutes Hinayana. That is why all these types of people try to make hindrances for a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. The great teacher Dingyo states, speaking of the age, the propagation of the true teaching will begin in the age when the middle day of the law ends and the latter day opens. Regarding the land, it will begin in the land to the east of the Dang and to the west of the Katsu. As for the people, it will spread among people stained by the 5 impurities who live in a time of conflict, like all of us at this table. The sutra says, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound, even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? There is good reason for this statement. The great teacher Dingyo seems to be describing his own day, but actually he is referring to our present time. His words, the former and middle days are almost over, and the latter day is near at hand, have just such a meaning. The sutra states, evil devils, the devil's people, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, kumbandra, demons, and others will seize the advantage. Another part of the sutra details these others, whether they be yaksha or rakshasa, or a hungry spirit, or a putana, or a kritya, or a vetara, or a skanda, or a umarka, or a apam, and this is all weird stuff that doesn't exist in the real world, demon kind of stuff, okay? And weird forms of life that you and I don't know offhand. Okay, or a yaksha kitra, okay, kritya, or a human kritya. And you want to go up, look up point 10, you can, it's meaningless. He's saying everything. What he's qualifying there is everything that could possibly be alive. Everything that could be considered a living being. That's why he just listed all this shit that you've never seen or heard. Okay? But it's in the sutras. All right? These passages explain that those who in previous lifetimes embraced the 4 flavors and 3 teachings, okay? Does everybody, these passages, okay, what explain that those in previous lifetimes embraced the 4 flavors and 3 teachings, comma, non-Buddhist teachings, or doctrines concerning the realms of human and heavenly beings, appear in this life as devils, or heavenly or human beings who persecute the votary and the perfect teaching when they see or hear of him. Question. In comparing the former and middle days with the latter day of the law, the first 2 were far superior in terms of both time and the people's capacity. Why are these factors of time and capacity ignored in the Lotus Sutra, which refers exclusively to this age? Does everybody understand what he's asking? Okay, because he's already qualified that the people in the former day and the middle day, there were still people capable of understanding the sutra as the Buddhism of the harvest. They are disciples that had not quite caught it at the ceremony in the, at the original assembly, that were born in the middle day, okay, do you understand?
Yes.
That still attain Buddhahood through their relationship to their original teacher of Shakyamuni, who is not the original teacher of all living beings. Do you understand? That's the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo Thus Come One. That's what we're trying to understand, this distinction. Because the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo comes one and makes his advent in the 5th 500-year period. That's why the Daishonin, through all these goshos, has made this distinction about himself. Okay? He's qualified. I'm a little bit different. My teaching is different. It's a different time.
Yes.
Now is the time for my teaching. Okay? For my disciples to appear. And he makes the declaratives. They will appear. They will achieve Kosen Rufu. Let me finish this gosho. He says, These passages explain that those who in previous lifetimes embraced the 4 flavors and 3 teachings, non-Buddhist teachings, or doctrines concerning the realms of human and heavenly beings appear in this life as devils or heavenly or human beings who persecute the votary of the true and perfect teaching when they see or hear him. Question. In comparing the former and middle days with the latter day of the law, the first 2 were far superior in terms of both time and the people's capacity. Why are these factors of time and capacity ignored in the Lotus Sutra, which refers exclusively to this age? And don't forget, this age, it will be spread by the people stained by the 5 impurities, it says, right? So quite the opposite of these cool people from the former and the middle day, when there were still sages, there were still, Kumara Jiva and all these other guys, Tiantai, Dingyo, Miolo, all these kinds of correct teachers were born in the form of the middle day. Okay? During the 1,000 years of the middle day teaching and practice, during the 1,000 years of the middle day, teaching and practice alone remained. Proof no longer existed. Do you understand what he means about practice, proof, and teaching? Proof no longer existed. Why did it no longer exist? During the 1,000 years of the middle day, teaching and practice alone remained. Proof no longer existed. Because the middle day of the law is the point in time when the Lotus Sutra becomes so twisted that it was losing its power of salvation. Okay? So the proof of that practice and teaching no longer existed with the same veracity or validity that it had in the former or during the lifetime of Shakyamuni. Do you understand? During the former day of the first 1,000 years or during the Buddha's lifetime. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right? So he says, during the 1,000 years of the middle day, teaching and practice alone remained. Proof no longer existed. In the latter day of the law, teaching alone remains. Neither practice nor proof exists. Buddhism of the harvest. Do you understand? On examining this from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra, we find that in the 1,000 years of the former day of the law, persons who possessed all 3 had most probably formed ties with the Lotus Sutra during the Buddha's lifetime. They were born again in the former day and were able to obtain proof of Hinayana through its teaching and practice. Those born in the middle day had not developed strong ties to the Lotus Sutra during the Buddha's lifetime and were therefore unable to attain proof through Hinayana. Do you understand? Is everybody with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. They turned instead to provisional Mahayana, which would have been the middle day instead of the former day, right?
Right.
And thus were able to be born in the pure lands of the 10 directions. In the latter day of the law, no benefit is derived from either Mahayana or Hinayana. Buddhism of the harvest. Hinayana retains nothing but its teaching, okay, precepts. It has neither practice nor proof. Mahayana still has its teaching and practice, but no longer provides any proof or benefit. That's why the prayers of the true word priest could not save the nation. Do you understand? All right. But no longer provides proof or benefit, either conspicuous or inconspicuous. So does everybody understand what he's qualified here now? Yes? Okay, so he's made the distinction of the former day. Hinayana would work. Potential, but those were superior. Those were people that were original disciples of the Buddha as the 16th son of the great universal wisdom excellence. Okay, those that hadn't quite gotten it, and it refers in other goshas to the 5,000 arrogant people that got up and left in the 2nd chapter. Yeah. Okay, those are the guys that appeared in the middle day. They had a relationship, enough of a relationship with Shakyamuni to actually come to the assembly where the Lotus Sutra was preached. But they thought they knew what they didn't know, and they all split. Okay? But the relationship maintained itself, so they were able to grab that teaching 2,000 years later. Do you understand? But the people that appear in the former and the middle day are not the people that appear in the latter day, nor is the Buddha who is their teacher the same. Do you understand? Okay?
The teacher is different, right?
Right, completely different, because we're true Buddhists.
Yes.
All of those Buddhas that I just spoke of are all provisional Buddhas. Not a single one of them told the real basis of how they attained enlightenment. Yes. They all talked about the expedient means of the Lotus Sutra. And even the Daishonin is qualifying as he's talking here. The Lotus Sutra. He's talking about the Buddhism of the harvest.
Yes.
Okay? So, and then you have to understand when he's talking about the Lotus Sutra, he really means the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So he says, in the latter day of the law, no benefit is derived from either Mahayana or Hinayana. Hinayana retains nothing but its teaching, and it has neither practice nor proof. Mahayana still has its teaching and practice, but no longer provides any proof of benefit, either conspicuous or inconspicuous. Furthermore, so in other words, also, then the teachings of all those other schools, then, he's just said, in that, are all worthless.
Right.
Okay? There's either no proof or there's no correct practice, okay, for this time period. Furthermore, the schools of Hinayana and Provisional Mahayana, established during the former and middle days of the law, cling all the more stubbornly to their doctrines as they enter the latter day. So they don't listen to the Buddha's pronouncement in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth. They're still clinging to the provisional teachings as a predication of attaining Buddhahood in the future, in many lifetimes in the future, as those teachings teach. Those who espouse Hinayana reject Mahayana, and those who espouse provisional teachings attack the true teaching until the country is overrun with slanderers of the law. Those who fall into the evil paths because of their mistaken practice of Buddhism outnumber the dust particles of the land, while those who attain the Buddha way by practicing the correct teaching are fewer than the specks of dirt that can be placed on a fingernail. At such a time, the heavenly gods and benevolent deities abandon the country, and only perverse heavenly beings and perverse demons remain, possessing the minds and bodies of the ruler, his subjects, and monks and nuns, and causing them to curse, revile, and heap shame on the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Do you understand what he just said there? He's saying those who fall into the evil paths because of their mistaken practice of Buddhism. He says that's the cause. All right? If, however, in the time after the Buddha's passing, a person renounces his attachments to the four flavors and the three teachings, the provisional, the Tripitaka, the connecting, and the perfect, right? And converts to faith in the Lotus Sutra that is true, the Buddhism of the sowing, he's talking about. Okay, do you understand? Mahayana, and converts to faith in the Lotus Sutra that is true Mahayana, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the heavenly gods and benevolent deities, as well as the bodhisattvas, numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, who emerged from beneath the ground, will protect him as the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Is everybody with me? He's qualifying those people that accept my Buddhism of the sowing in the latter day. That's who he's talking about. Only. All right? Under their protection, these benevolent deities, he will, this teacher, a person, he will establish and spread abroad widely throughout Jampadvipa the object of devotion of the essential teaching, or the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. Everybody's with me? He's talking about himself here. You understand that, right? It was the same with Bodhisattva Never Disparaging, who lived in the middle day of the law of the Buddha Awesome Sound King, who was the previous life of... Who was the previous life of Never Disparaging? Shakyamuni. They propagated widely throughout his land the teaching of 24 characters that begins, I have profound reverence for you. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? And was attacked with sticks of wood by the whole population. The 24 characters of Never Disparaging and the 5 characters of Nichiren are different in wording, but accord with the same principle. The end of the Buddha Awesome Sound King's middle day and the beginning of the latter day of the law are exactly the same in method of conversion. Bodhisattva Never Disparaging was a practitioner at the initial stage of rejoicing. Nichiren is an ordinary practitioner at the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. Okay, now why does he say they are different in wording but they're the same in principle? What did the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging do? He did Shakabuku. He didn't do Shoju. Do you understand? He was doing Shakabuku. That's why he pissed them off. That's why they threw rocks and stones and pelted him with tiles. Okay? So that's what the Daishonin is qualifying here. All right? The end of the Buddha Awesome Sound King's middle day and the beginning of the latter day are exactly the same in method of conversion, shakabuku. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, was a practitioner at the initial stage of rejoicing. Nichiren is an ordinary practitioner at the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. And if you look up that note there, point 11, it's basically explaining those are both the same thing. One's from the five practices, the 5 stages of practice, the other one from the 6 stages of practice, okay? Question, how can you be certain that you are the votary of the Lotus Sutra prophesied to appear at the beginning of the latter day of the law? He's directly speaking of himself.
Yes.
Answer, the Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? Another passage reads, there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves. But in reality, it's just by virtue of coming into contact with us is the only thing that's necessary to start them along the path to Buddhahood. Okay? What happened to all of those people that persecuted, never disparaging? They all attained enlightenment. They all suffered the karma of the hells that were necessary based on their slander of the law. But they all came back, became his disciples, and attained Buddhahood. All right? So, he said, there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves. I would never disparage. All you got to do is let them hear the name and the words of the truth. Okay? Their karma unravels everything from that point. So, it's not about winning a battle of a conversation or converting somebody to a concept of belief or understanding. You don't have to go that far. Your function will be there if that person's karma is to want to understand and come into contact with that. Okay? But for those people of different sects and faith, you're not going to get into a religious debate and convert them on the spot. Okay? The important thing, though, is that you have a conviction in your belief that they can see as clearly, very solid, bright and shiny, and you convey that conviction of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is the correct teaching. They've heard this now. They can never escape hearing this message. You're probably not the first time they've ever heard it, but you might be the first time that they've heard it. Okay? But the key is don't expect to convert people on the basis of how much you know. That's not the basis of how they're converted.
So
okay?
Is there conversion, this word, in this case? There is...
Conversion is swaying a person over to accepting a different way of embracing the teaching.
It cannot be achieved this way.
No, again, when I'm talking about converting, I'm talking about changing somebody from a following the path of provisional Buddhism, okay, to following what he's calling correct Mahayana or true Mahayana or the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law, or the Buddhism of the sowing, or Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, or the teaching of Nichiren, the correct teaching of Nichiren. Do you understand? Okay, so everybody's with me, right?
Yes.
All right, so another passage reads, there will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves. A third passage says, again and again we will be banished. A fourth reads, the Lotus Sutra will face much hostility in the world and be difficult to believe. A fifth reads, some among the group will take sticks of wood or tiles and stones and beat and pelt him. A sixth reads, evil devils, the devil's people, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, kimbadara demons, and others will seize the advantage. That the people might believe in the Buddha's words, I have held up the bright mirror of these scriptural passages before the ruler, his subjects, and the 4 categories of Buddhists throughout Japan. Do you understand what he's saying? He's saying that the people might believe in the Buddha's words, the words that are honestly discarding the provisional teachings, the words of the Lotus Sutra, the teaching that the correct teaching will make its advent in the 5th 500-year period, right? He said, I have held up the bright mirror for everybody to see that what I'm saying is actually reflected in the Lotus Sutra. I'm not making this up. He's saying, he says, I've held up the bright mirror of these scriptural passages which delineate everything that I'm talking about. And I've already given my initial thesis called the Rishoan Kokoran on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. I've already given that to the shogunate. All right? I've already given that to the ruler. Okay? And his subjects. And the 4 categories of Buddhists. Monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen throughout Japan. But I can find none other than myself who has lived these passages. As for the time, now is almost certainly the beginning of the latter day of the law. But had Nichiren not appeared, the Buddha's words would be false, because no one else has fulfilled the prophecy of the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Question: you are an extremely arrogant monk, even more arrogant than Mahadeva or Sunkashatra. Is this not so? Answer: insulting Nichiren, dig this, insulting Nichiren is an offense even greater than those of Devadatta or Vimala Mitra. Okay, now I don't know who Vimala Mitra is, but you know who Devadatta was, right? Yes. Okay, so he's saying insulting Nichiren is an offense even greater than those of Devadatta or Vimala Mitra. Okay, so what is he qualifying there? Because the law is supreme, so is the person. Does he make any distinction between his life and your life? No. So when he says this, this also applies to you. So insulting you as the Buddha, when you manifest that state through the correct teaching, the correct practice, not just the correct belief, okay? You take on this same aspect. That's why you don't have to worry about anybody else. Flip them the bird with a smile in your mind. Because they cannot screw with you. Insulting Nichiren is an offense. I should have compassion for everybody that insults me. They just stepped into shit. They thought they were just insulting a common person. The same way they thought they were just insulting a common person when they insulted Nichiren. This is what he's trying to get you to understand. This is what I'm trying to teach you, what his teaching actually is. There's no distinction between him and you. Okay? My words may sound arrogant, just like what I just said. Boy, didn't that sound arrogant? No! I am reciting what his teaching is. He's reciting what the Lotus Sutra says. The Lotus Sutra says what Shakyamuni taught. How could that be arrogance? God damn it, it's not arrogance.
No.
Sorry.
Hey, maybe
my words may sound arrogant. Well, because I'm sure it does. But it's not. What you hear is the conviction of faith.
Yeah.
That's what you're hearing him say.
Yeah.
I believe what I'm saying. I believe what I've read. I believe the words of my teacher. Okay? My words may sound arrogant, but my sole purpose is to fulfill the Buddha's predictions and reveal the truth of his words by achieving the great pure law at making its advent in the 5th 500-year period and Kosen Rufu being achieved. In all Japan, who but Nichiren can be called the votary of the Lotus Sutra? By denouncing and by association, who can be called votaries of the Lotus Sutra but his disciples?
Yes.
Only by virtue of him being the true votary, we're his disciples, oneness of person and mentor and disciple, we are also votaries of the Lotus Sutra. By denouncing Nichiren, you would make lies of the Buddha's prophecies. By denouncing the bodhisattvas of the earth, you would be making lies of the Buddha's prophecies. Please understand that. That's why people end up brain dead. They don't do it because they made the right causes. Seriously. That's not in any of the teachings. Great difficulties, you overcome all of them. What you talked about is a difficulty that was not overcomable. Brain death usually doesn't come back. Are you not, here it goes. He says, by denouncing Nichiren, you would make lies of the Buddha's prophecies. Are you not then an extremely evil man? Question, you certainly fit the thus come one's prophecies. But are there perhaps other votaries of the Lotus Sutra in the 5 regions of India or the land of China? In other words, he's questioning, are you the only one? Answer, throughout the 4 continents of the world, there are surely not 2 suns. I'm the sun. Are there 2 suns? No. So within the 4 seas, how can there be 2 rulers? Question, on what basis do you say that? Answer, the moon appears in the west and sheds its light eastward, but the sun rises in the east and casts its rays to the west. The same is true of Buddhism. It spread from west to east in the former and middle days of the law, but will travel from east to west in the latter day. The great teacher Myolo says, does this not mean that Buddhism has been lost in India, the country of its origin, and must now be sought in the surrounding regions? Thus, no Buddhism is found in India anymore. Okay, because the only thing that's left is provisional teachings that no longer are correct and no longer should be practiced according to Shakyamuni himself. During the 150 years or so since barbarians from the north invaded the eastern capital in the time of the Emperor Kongtsung, both Buddhism and imperial authority became extinct in China. Concerning the collection of scriptures kept in China, not one Hinayana Sutra remains, and most Mahayana sutras have also been lost. Even when Jakusho and other priests set out from Japan to take some sutras to China, no one was found there who could embrace these sutras and teach them to others. It was though there were only wooden or stone statues garbed in priest robes and carrying begging bowls. That is why Tsushin said, Buddhism, came first from the west like the moon appearing. Now it is returning from the east like the sun rising. These remarks make it clear that Buddhism is lost in both India and China. Correct teaching, Buddhism. All right? Question. Now, I can see no Buddhism exists in either India or China. But how do you know no Buddhism exists in the other 3 continents, in the east, west, and north? Answer. The 8th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, after the thus come one has entered extinction, I will cause it, the Lotus Sutra, to be widely propagated throughout Jambavipa and will see that it never comes to an end. The words throughout Jambavipa indicate that the other 3 continents are excluded. Question. I have seen that the Buddha's prophecy applies to you. Now, what do you yourself predict? Answer. In light of the Buddha's prophecy, the last 500-year period has already begun. I say that without fail, Buddhism will arise and flow forth from the east, from the land of Japan. Omens will occur in the form of unusual disturbances in the heavens and terrible calamities on earth that will be greater in magnitude than ever before witnessed in the former or middle day of the law. When the Buddha was born, when he turned the wheel of the law, and also when he entered nirvana, the omens, both auspicious and inauspicious, were greater than any ever observed. The Buddha is the teacher of all sages. The sutras describe how, at the time of his birth, light shone forth in 5 colors in all directions, and the night became as bright as noon. At the time of his passing, 12 wide arcs crossed the sky from north to south. The sun's light was extinguished, and the day became as dark as midnight. There followed the 2,000 years of the former and middle days of the law. Sages, some Buddhists and some not, were born and died, but never were there any omens of such magnitude. From the beginning of the Shoka era, 1257, through this year, however, tremendous earthquakes and extraordinary phenomena in the heavens have occurred, exactly like the signs that mark the Buddha's birth and death. You should know from this that a sage like the Buddha has been born. He's again speaking of himself. A great comet crossed the sky, but for which ruler or subject did this omen appear? He's talking about Tatsuya Kuchi. Get it? The earth tilted and gaping fissures opened 3 times, but for which sage and worthy did this occur? This all happened in Japan. You should realize that these great omens, both good and bad, are of no ordinary secular significance. They're of no ordinary, non-religious cause. These are for the purpose of substantiating the advent that is described in the Lotus Sutra as being indicated by these disturbances and these omens. Okay? Because again, this is 12th century. Omens carry a lot of weight. They have to be part of the teaching. They have to be part of the scripture. There is no science. Okay? All right? So, the earth tilted and gaping fissures opened up 3 times. But for which sage or worthy did this occur? You should realize that these great omens, both bad and good, are of no ordinary secular significance. They are signs that the teachings of the supreme law are ascending and that the other teachings are in decline. What does supreme mean? Supreme law. Means no greater law than that law. Tentai states, by observing the fury of the rain, we can tell the greatness of the dragon that caused it, and by observing the flourishing of the lotus flowers, we can tell the depth of the pond they grow in. Mielo says, wise men can perceive the cause of things as snakes know the way of snakes. One of my favorite sayings. 21 years have gone by since I, Nichiren, understood this principle and began propagation. During this period, I have suffered difficulties day after day and month after month. In the last 2 or 3 years, among other things, I was almost put to death. The chances are 1 in 10,000 that I will survive the year or even the month. If anyone questions these things, let that person ask my disciples for details. Where is he as he's writing this? Sado Island. He's like he said, the chances of me making off this island are almost nothing. But I made it so far. And nobody thought I could. So who knows what the future holds? He's saying, the chances are 1 in 10,000 that I will survive the year or even the month. If anyone questions these things, let that person ask my disciples for details. But regardless of that, what fortune is mine to expiate in one lifetime the offenses of slandering the law I have accumulated from the infinite past. How delighted I am to serve Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of teachings, whom I have never seen. I pray that before anything else I can guide and lead the ruler and those others who persecuted me. I will tell the Buddha about all the disciples who have aided me, and before I die, I will transfer the great blessings derived from my practice to my parents who gave me life. Now, as if in a dream, I understand the heart of the Treasure Tower chapter. As the sutra states, if you were to seize Mount Sumeru and fling it far off to the meaningless Buddha lands, to the measureless Buddha lands, that too would not be difficult. But if after the Buddha has entered extinction in the time of evil, the latter day of the law, if you can preach this sutra, that will be difficult indeed. The great teacher Dingyo says, Shakyamuni taught that the shallow is easy to embrace, but the profound is difficult. To discard the shallow and seek the profound is the way of a person of courage, the way of a Buddha. The great teacher Tentai trusted and observed and obeyed Shakyamuni and worked to uphold the Lotus School, spreading its teachings throughout China. We of Mount Hei inherited the doctrines from Tentai and worked to uphold the Lotus Sutra, the Lotus School, and to disseminate its teachings throughout Japan. I, Nichiren of Awa Province, have doubtless inherited the teachings of the law from these 3 teachers, and in this era of the latter day, I work to uphold the Lotus School and disseminate the law. Together, we should be called the 4 teachers of the 3 countries. Do you understand what he just was talking about there? Who are the 4 countries for the 4 teachers of the three countries? What are the 3 countries? India, China, Japan. Who are the 4 teachers? Shakyamuni, Tentai, Dingyo, and Nichiren. Right. Dingyo's Japan as well. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Written by Nichiren, the Shramana of Japan. Let's go on to the lecture. Okay. Starting now on page, on the Buddhist, that we read this Gosho last week. It's the Gosho that precedes the Gosho that we just read. It's called On Practicing the Buddha's Teachings. It's in a lecture given in 3 parts. We've already read the whole Gosho last week. I'll start now on page 1 of the Teachings for Victory by Daisaku Ikeda, Volume 2. Starting page 1. On practicing the Buddhist teachings, part 1 of 3, striving for Kosen Rufu in the spirit of the oneness of mentor and disciple is the key to true peace and security in this existence. It's the manner in which you attain Buddhahood in your present form, which is the ultimate peace and security in this existence, okay? The passage for study in this lecture from the Gosho. On examination of the Lotus Sutra, we find that those who are born in this land and believe in this sutra, when it is propagated in the latter day of the law, will be subjected to hatred and jealousy even greater than that which arose in the lifetime of the thus come one. What is more, once you become a disciple or lay supporter of the votary who practices the true What is more, once you become a disciple or lay supporter of the votary who practices the true Lotus Sutra in accord with the Buddha's teachings, you are bound to face the 3 types of enemies. And again, he's referring to himself. Once you become my disciple. Therefore, from the very day you listen to and take faith in this sutra, you should be fully prepared to face the great persecutions of the 3 types of enemies that are certain to be more horrible now after the Buddha's passing. Although my disciples had already heard this when both great and small persecutions confronted us, some were so astounded and terrified that they even forsook their faith. Did I not warn you in advance? I have been teaching you day and night directly from the sutra, which says, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? This is indeed an accursed time to live in this land. However, the Buddha has commanded me to be born in this age, and it is impossible for me to go against the decree of the Dharma King. And so, as the sutra dictates, I have launched the battle between the provisional and the true teachings, donning the armor of endurance and girding myself with the sword of the wonderful teaching. I have raised the banner of the 5 characters of Myoho Rengekyo, the heart of the entire 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra. Then, drawing the bow of the Buddha's declaration, I have not yet revealed the truth, and, notching the arrow of honestly discarding the provisional teachings, I have mounted the carriage drawn by the great white ox and battered down the gates of the provisional teachings, attacking first one and then another. I have refuted opponents from the 8 and 10 schools, such as the Nembutsu, true words, Zen, and precepts. Some have fled headlong, while others have retreated, and still others have been captured to become my disciples. I continue to repulse their attacks and to defeat them, but legions of enemies exist to oppose the single Dharma King and the handful who follow him. So the battle goes on, even today. The Lotus Sutra is the teaching of Shakabuku, the refutation of the provisional doctrines. True to the letter of this golden saying, in the end, every last one of the believers of the provisional teachings and schools will be defeated and joined in the retinue of the Dharma King. The time will come when all people will abandon the various kinds of vehicles and take up the single vehicle of Buddhahood, and the mystic law alone will flourish throughout the land. When the people all chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the wind will no longer buffet the branches, and the rain will no longer break the clods of soil. The world will become as it was in the ages of Fuxi and Shenung, and in their present existence the people will be freed from misfortune and disasters and learn the art of living long. Realize that the time will come when the truth will be revealed that both the person and the law are unaging and eternal. There cannot be the slightest doubt about the Sutra's promise of peace and security in their present existence. From the Volume 1 of the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, page 391 and 392. The lecture by President Ikeda on page 3 of this lecture. The Chinese character myo of myoho, or mystic law, has the meaning of to open. Open the way with prayer based on the shared commitment of mentor and disciple. Open the way with the courage to forge ahead bravely and vigorously. Open the way with the wisdom to perceive the essential truth and changing circumstances. open the way with self-assured and confident action. That's President Ikeda. That's a poem by President Ikeda, I would assume. Since the time of its first president, Tanesaburo Makaguchi, the Soka Gakkai has grown and developed by pioneering new frontiers for Kosen Rufu, always maintaining a direct connection to Nichiren Daishonin and basing everything on his writings. This will remain the Soka Gakkai's fundamental spirit for all time. This is also the key to faith for absolute victory, and it is highlighted in Nichiren's writings on practicing the Buddha's teachings, okay, which is what we just read, right? Or pardon me, which we read last week. The title of this letter literally translates to "On Practice as the Buddha Teaches." Here, "as the Buddha teaches" can also be interpreted to mean "as the teacher expounds." Nichiren set an example for his disciples by reading the correct teaching of the Lotus Sutra with his life and practicing as the Buddha teaches. He waged a confrontation of words to refute the erroneous and reveal the true, holding high the banner of universal enlightenment. Holding high the banner that all people are Buddhas exactly as they are. And he did so in the latter day of the law, an age of conflict when people have lost sight of the Buddha's correct teaching and grow confused in their thinking and direction, which results in an environment of incessant strife. Nichiren's great struggle of refutation, or shakabuku, provoked attacks by the three powerful enemies, just as the sutra predicts. But by boldly confronting and triumphing over these devilish functions, he proved the veracity of the Lotus Sutra for us of modern times. Practicing as the Buddha teaches means practicing in accord with the teachings of Nichiren. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So it's not practicing in accord with the teachings of Shakyamuni. All right? The final chapter of Mr. Makaguchi's Kachiran, Theory of Value, which second Soka Gakkai President Josei Toda revised, concludes with the following words, including some famous lines from On Practicing the Buddha's Teachings. This is the quote from President Makaguchi, only when the correct teaching of Buddhism that elucidates the very essence of human existence comes to be widely disseminated will it be possible to truly create a land of tranquil light that brings unsurpassed happiness to all people. I'll read it again. Only when the correct teaching of Buddhism that elucidates the very essence of human existence comes to be widely disseminated will it be possible to truly create a land of tranquil light that brings unsurpassed happiness to all people. As the Daishonin writes, the Lotus Sutra is the teaching of Shakabuku, the refutation of the erroneous, of the provisional doctrines. There cannot be the slightest doubt about the sutra's promise of peace and security in their present existence. Now, what's the significance of that? Why did President Makaguchi say that? What's the significance of what he just said? I'll read it one more time. Only when the correct teaching of Buddhism that elucidates the very essence of human existence comes to be widely disseminated will be possible to truly create a land of tranquil light that brings unsurpassed happiness to all people. What's that land of tranquil light that brings unsurpassed happiness to all people? That's widespread propagation. That's Kosen Rufu. That's Kosen Rufu. All right? Everybody's with me, right?
Yes.
So what's he saying here? What he's saying here is that President Makaguchi had written in his secular book. I mean, he wasn't a priest. This was still at this point in time, it was for teachers only, right? This is the Gokuku Kikiku, whatever, right? So what President Makaguchi is making the point of is, without shakabuku, without active refutation of incorrect understanding to establish correct understanding, the predication that the Fuji school was saying it was upholding is bullshit. Okay? In other words, you can be a bunch of priests that believe in Nichiren's teaching and say that Nichiren is your teacher, but unless you're going out and making the causes that create Kosen Rufu, which is what he said to do as his disciples, you are not his disciple. Do you understand? So he's saying, only when the correct teaching of Buddhism that elucidates, that clarifies that the very essence of human existence comes to be widely disseminated. Okay? So only when the fact, this practice that allows us to bring forth the 10th world in our 9-world life, Buddhahood in our present form, actual Ichen and Sanzen, can a truly peaceful land be created. It's theoretical. If you're not working toward it, you're slandering the condition that you say you're devoted to. Do you understand? That's why this is splitting. Notice that he's also saying the final chapter of Mr. Makaguchi's Kachiran, which Second Soka Gakkai President Toda revised. Why would he revised it? He would have revised it to put it in accord with his understanding of now having gone through prison. Don't forget, Makaguchi's dead. He died in prison, right?
Yes.
So, where did Toda attain Buddhahood? In prison, right? So, when he came out of prison and he was viewing the teachings of his mentor, do you think he perceived them as he had before he went into prison? No. Okay? That's the point. That's where this correct practice comes into play that we were talking about. That's why President Makaguchi used to say, I take one true practitioner over 1,000 true believers. True belief is easy. True practice is extremely difficult. This is the point to understand. To seek the shallow is easy. I'll just believe in it. Okay? People believe in Jesus. They believe in Allah. They believe in all kinds of shit. Belief is inconsequential. It's action. Bodhicitta. Do you understand? All right, so creating a land of tranquil light that actualizes the sutra's promise of true peace and security, rather than leaving it as a theory, creates Kosen Rufu in this existence, was the ardent wish of the first and second presidents and the conclusion of Mr. Makaguchi's treatise on value. Mr. Makaguchi gave his life to the struggle to realize this ideal, refusing to submit to the unjust persecution of Japan's wartime militarist authorities. He practiced in exact accord with Nichiren's teachings. Right? That's why he went to Taisekuji when they put up the Shinto talisman on the order of the emperor and said, no. But they'll burn the head temple down. He says, I don't care. That's what you're not supposed to do what you're doing. Okay. The word gets out, oh, you're creating all this crap. Hey, truth police come after him. Say, take back what you said or you're going to go to prison. Make my day.
Make my day.
And Toda going, do we really have to? Yes. Okay? And he got his reward. So, Mr. Makaguchi gave his life to the struggle to realize this ideal, refusing to submit to the unjust persecution of Japan's wartime militarist authorities. He practiced in exact accord with Nichiren's teachings, did not begrudge his life. Mr. Toda made a large double circle in red next to the title on practicing the Buddha's teachings in his copy of Nichiren's writings to indicate the special importance of this writing. As his loyal and devoted disciple, I also read this letter countless times, engraving in my heart Nichiren's spirit to refute error in the realm of Buddhism. I fondly recall studying on practicing the Buddhist teachings with members who gathered at my apartment when I was the Young Men's Division First Corps leader. Many years later, I lectured on this writing for high school division representatives. Nothing gives me greater joy than studying Nichiren's writings and putting them into practice together with the youth who will shoulder the future. I hope that today's youth division members will seriously study Nichiren's sublime philosophy, and in so doing strengthen their conviction and faith and develop their ability to speak to others articulately about their Buddhist practice. God damn, that's important. Let's say it again. I hope that today's youth division members will seriously study Nichiren's sublime philosophy, and in so doing strengthen their conviction in faith and develop their ability to speak to others articulately about this Buddhist practice. That is what I have endeavored to do myself, for that reason, for that purpose. I encourage you to do the same, and I know you are. On practicing the Buddhist teachings outlines how genuine disciples strive to realize Buddhism's lofty ideals unafraid of hardships, just as their teacher instructs. It is an important writing that contains the essence of the oneness of mentor and disciple. Let us engrave it deeply in our lives for the continuing development of Kozen Rufu and the SGI's enduring victory into the eternal future of the latter day of the law. The challenges of propagating the mystic law in the latter day. By the way, let me go, before I go on to that point, since I made a point about this study part, let me again qualify to you that the key and most important aspect of study is, once you've read it, going and chanting Daimoku in front of the Gohonzon. That's when Buddha wisdom starts to emerge from your life, and you start to be able to read between the lines, and you start to retain understanding rather than have it slip out of your mind every time. That's when you start to begin to build in a process that gets greater and greater and greater.
Yes.
Okay? It's all about Daimoku. It's not about what you read.
Or think.
Or think.
Right.
Thinking is a ninth world process unless it's in front of the Gohonzon.
Right.
Yes.
Okay? Okay, so, what time is it, bro?
9:05.
Okay, then good. We'll stop there. We'll start again on page 5, where it says the challenges of propagating the mystic law in the latter day. The perfect way segue. And until next week, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.